Welcome back to Driftwood Stories, where stars drift quietly over sleeping seas, and the winds carry names long whispered by waves. Tonight we follow the echo of oars, the sigh of sails, and the steady, stubborn hope of a man who longs not for glory, but for home. The war is over, Troy has fallen, and one ship sails alone through storm and silence alike. Odysseus, clever, weather-worn and unyielding, a king not searching for conquest, but for the soft hush of his island, for a hearth and a voice and a hand that remembers his own. Let us drift with him, past strange islands and older gods, through dreams and danger, and the kind of wisdom only sorrow brings. Tonight is not a tale of battle. It is a lullaby of return. So close your eyes and let the waves guide you into the story of Odysseus and the long journey home. Chapter 1. The war behind, the sea ahead. The smoke still rose behind him. From the deck of his ship, Odysseus watched as Troy collapsed into shadow. The proud towers he once saw in dreams now flickered in ruin. The cries of battle had faded, replaced by silence, thick, heavy, like the air before a storm. He did not cheer. There was no joy in the end of a war, just a longing, a quiet, growing ache, for home, for the soft green hills of Ithaca, for the scent of olive trees, for the voice of Penelope, warm and waiting, and the laughter of a son who barely knew his name. It had been 10 years of steel and flame and names carved into stone. Now, with Troy fallen and the gods gone quiet, Odysseus turned away, not in triumph, but in hope. The sea opened before him like a page yet written. 12 ships followed in his wake, their sails catching the morning breeze. His men, loyal, weathered, tired, sang softly as they worked, their voices low and rhythmic, like prayers too old for words. The sky stretched wide. The ocean shimmered like hammered bronze. And yet something watched. Far above, on Mount Olympus, not all gods had turned their gaze. Poseidon, lord of the sea, still nursed his pride like a wounded lion. Odysseus had angered him, not with war but with wit, and the sea god is slow to forgive. Still, the journey began gently. The first days were kind, the wind behind them, the stars familiar. At night, Odysseus would lie awake beneath the sail, staring at constellations that reminded him of his father's stories. He traced Orion with his fingertip, whispered to the Pleiades, remembered the lullabies of his boyhood. But dreams were dangerous things. On the 4th morning they saw land, an island low and green, mist curling from its shores like a beckoning hand. The men cheered. Their hands ached for fruit, their mouths dry for sweet water. Odysseus hesitated. He felt something, a hush too deep, a stillness too still. But his men were already rowing. They stepped ashore and wandered. The island was soft, too soft, grass like velvet, trees heavy with golden blossoms, and strange fruit, wide-petalled and dripping with nectar. The lotus-eaters, the first of many trials. His men ate and forgot. Their eyes grew dreamy, their limbs relaxed. They smiled and sank into the grass, murmuring nothing, remembering no one. Ithaca faded from their hearts like smoke on the breeze. Odysseus stood in the sand, heart heavy. He called their names, shouted, begged, but they only laughed, slow and far away, as if he were a memory. And so he dragged them, one by one, back to the ships. He tied them to the benches with soft rope and set sail, tears in his eyes for having to steal his friends back from comfort. The sea welcomed them again, its voice no longer gentle. It whispered warnings, promises, names he had not spoken aloud. Still they sailed on, for days, for weeks, until they came upon another island, larger, rockier, with a bay like an open jaw. They were low on food, their water was brackish, and so they landed again. This time there were no blossoms, only silence and a cave. Inside, cheese, honey, milk, abundance, and bones. Large bones, too large. The men whispered of gods and giants. But hunger speaks louder than fear, and they stayed, feasting, laughing nervously, until dusk, when the cave's true owner returned, Polyphemus, a cyclops, a shepherd, and alone. His eye, a single orb, pale and vast, blinked slowly as he saw them. He did not roar, not yet. He simply closed the mouth of the cave with a stone too great for 10 men to move. Then he began to eat. One man, then another, and the rest cried out. But Odysseus, ever thinking, said nothing. He watched, he waited, he planned. That night, while the monster slept in drunken slumber, Odysseus carved a stake from olive wood. Smooth, sharp, silent, at dawn with a name false on his lips, no one, he had told the beast, Odysseus struck. The eye hissed. The cave roared. Polyphemus groped blindly for them, crashing into stone, but they escaped, clinging to the bellies of sheep, slipping through wool and shadow until they reached the shore. The Cyclops screamed, and as they sailed away, Odysseus, proud, still burning from Troy, could not resist. He turned. "I am not no one," he shouted. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, of Ithaca." The sea grew still, and deep below, Poseidon opened one eye. Chapter 2, Islands of Wonder and Fog. The sea, once silver and open, turned strange. The winds no longer followed the stars. The sky lost its colour, and Odysseus, clever though he was, could not read the water as he once had. They drifted, days and nights blurred like ink in water. The men grew restless. Some whispered of curses, others dreamed aloud of Ithaca, of vineyards and firelight, of wives with soft voices and children waiting with questions. Odysseus said little. He studied the horizon. Then one morning the mists parted and revealed a floating isle wrapped in wind. Aeolia, a palace of clouds and humming breeze. Home of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. The king welcomed them kindly. He had heard of Odysseus, the clever one, the trickster, the hero of Troy. He offered a feast, a warm bed, and at last a gift, a leather bag tied tight with silver cord. Within it, Aeolus said, are all the winds of the world, except one, the breeze that will carry you home. Odysseus bowed. I will guard it with my life. And for 9 days they sailed straight, the breeze at their backs, the sky bright with promise. But on the 10th day, as Ithaca's hills came into view, Odysseus, too weary to stand, fell into sleep. And his men, curious, covetous, afraid of treasure kept from them, untied the bag, The winds screamed free. They twisted the sky, shattered the sails, and hurled the ship backward, back into the unknown. When Odysseus awoke, there was only sea and silence. He did not speak of the grief in his chest. He simply turned the rudder again and again and again, until they came upon a narrow strait, tall cliffs on either side, birds circling like omens, Laestrygonians. At first the island seemed empty, still watchful, but then giants rose from the hills with eyes like coals and limbs like tree trunks. They hurled stones the size of houses, smashed 11 ships to splinters. Only Odysseus's vessel escaped, swift, lucky, trembling. They rode into the open sea, hearts in their throats, salt drying on their lips like sorrow. And then peace, for a time. They found another island, this one soft with forest, the air sweet with spice. Birds sang, the trees swayed like dancers, and the ground was thick with herbs and flowers. Circe's island. The sorceress lived in a hall of carved wood, beneath ivy and moonlight. She welcomed them with wine and honeyed words. Her eyes shimmered like glassy pools, and her voice wrapped around the men like song. They drank, and one by one they changed into pigs, not slain, not harmed, just transformed snouts, hooves, bristles, their thoughts still human, their cries still full of fear. But Circe only smiled. Odysseus, warned by one who escaped, went to her alone. He carried a charm gifted by Hermes, swift messenger of the gods, a herb of silver-white petals and bitter root. He stood before her, sword drawn, eyes clear. She tried to enchant him, but he did not change. Instead he spoke softly. "I have seen war and monsters and gods in shadow. I do not wish to fight you." Circe paused. No man had ever resisted her before. She blinked once, and then laughed, not cruelly but softly, like a curtain fluttering in spring. "You are not like the others," she said. "Stay," and he did, for a year. The days were golden, the nights warm. The men, restored to human form, lived well. Circe was no longer a threat, but a teacher. She showed them hidden things, herbs that healed, stars that guided, animals that listened. She spoke of tides and truths, but Odysseus could not forget Ithaca. Every time the breeze touched his face, he heard Penelope's name in it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shape of his home. And so he went to Circe, gentle but firm. "I must leave." She did not weep. She simply nodded and pointed east. "To return home, you must go first to the land of the dead." Odysseus did not ask why. He gathered his crew. They lit no fire. They sang no songs. They sailed to the edge of the world, to the place where the sea turned black and the sun did not rise. There they dropped anchor before a cliff of stone where no bird flew. Odysseus stepped ashore alone. He dug a trench in the earth, poured honey and milk, wine and barley, sprinkled it with the blood of a black lamb, and waited. The spirits came slowly, like mist curling through trees. Whispers filled the air, names, memories, regrets. Then came Tiresias, the blind prophet, still wise even in death. "You seek home," he said, "but the path is narrow. Temptation will call you, storms will test you, and at the end you must walk through silence before you find peace." "Will I make it?" Odysseus asked. The ghost did not answer, only smiled, not cruelly, but with the sorrow of one who has seen the weight of every future. Then came others, his mother, pale and gentle, old friends, lost warriors, all flickering like candlelight in the wind. When at last the sun touched the horizon again, the dead faded. Odysseus returned to his ship, changed, quieter, wiser, and the sea, waiting like a patient teacher, opened once more. Chapter 3, The Sorceress and the Underworld. The sea felt different after the underworld, colder perhaps, or simply quieter, as if it too had glimpsed the land where no winds blow, where souls walk without weight, where the stars no longer sing. Odysseus stood at the helm, one hand on the wood, the other on the memory of his mother's voice. She had faded like a mist in his arms, and yet he had heard her. He had remembered her eyes, and so he sailed on. The sun rose reluctantly each morning, and the men moved softly, their laughter gentler now, as though speaking too loud might summon the shadows again. But not all darkness is sorrow. When they returned to Circe's island, she was waiting, as if time had never passed. She welcomed them back with open arms and food warm from the fire. No enchantments, no riddles, just rest. Odysseus sat beside her, and they spoke long into the night. "You are changed," she said. "I've seen what lies below," he replied. "And I still choose the light." Circe smiled. "Then listen closely, sailor. The sea still has trials for you." She told him of the Sirens, creatures with voices spun from memory, who sang not of death, but of desire. Not screams, but seduction. Not cruelty, but comfort. "They will sound like everything you've ever wanted," she said. "They will call you home, even as they pull you into the dark." Odysseus nodded. "How do I survive them? Wax for your men's ears," she said, "and for you, ropes, and then—" "Then comes the strait," Circe whispered, "between Scylla and Charybdis. Choose one, or be taken by both." Odysseus did not flinch. He stayed one more night, no longer as a lover, but as a friend. In the soft blue of morning, Circe kissed his brow and handed him a jar of wild honey. "For strength," she said, "and sweetness." And he was gone. The Sirens came first. The sea grew still as glass. The sky held its breath, and from beyond the mist a sound curled through the air, soft, slow, silver as moonlight on a harp string. It was not a song, it was a memory. Voices, plural and one, singing of home, of childhood, of secret hopes Odysseus had not spoken aloud in years. "Come," they sang. "We see you, we know your name. Come rest, clever king. You've done enough." His heart ached. Even lashed to the mast, his body strained toward them, his eyes filled with tears, not from sorrow, but from the sudden, overwhelming ache of almost believing. But the ropes held. His men, deaf to the song, rowed steady, and the voices faded, not in anger, but in something softer, disappointment. He fell limp when it was done. Trained, quiet, but alive. Then, the rocks. On one side, Charybdis, a whirlpool, dark and hungry, sucking down ships like breath through a broken tooth. On the other, Scylla, a creature with 6 serpent heads, hidden in shadow, swift as lightning. Odysseus chose. He turned toward Scylla. The ship rocked. The cliffs narrowed. The wind shrieked, and suddenly cries, snapped ropes, blood. 6 of his men plucked from the deck in a blink, their names lost to the sky. He did not look back, not because he did not mourn, but because he knew it would destroy him. They rowed through the strait, hearts hollow, and when they reached open water again, no one spoke. Odysseus sat alone that night. He let the stars pass without counting them. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He simply waited until the next morning brought an island, green and gold and wide as a dream. Thrinacia, the island of the sun god. Here, Circe had warned, dwelled sacred cattle, beasts untouched, unspoiled. To eat them would mean ruin. Odysseus told his men. He begged, "We have food enough. We must not." They nodded, but the sea kept them there too long. The winds turned, their stores ran dry, and one night, while Odysseus slept, his first deep sleep in weeks, they slaughtered the sacred cows. The fire hissed, the bones cracked, and the sky turned grey. When he woke, it was already too late. They set sail under storm-racked skies. The sea boiled. The wind howled like a wounded god, and one by one the ships fell, until only Odysseus remained. His ship splintered, his men gone, the horizon empty. He clung to Driftwood. He drifted. For days, weeks, time blurred, the sun burned, the rain chilled, his skin peeled, his lips cracked, and then an island, a beach, a breath. He had washed upon the shore of Ogygia, and there, waiting as though she had always been, stood Calypso. Chapter 4. The Song of the Sirens. The island of Ogygia was hidden from the world, a place untouched by time, where seasons folded into one another like silk. The trees bore fruit even in moonlight, and the sea sang lullabies to the shore. It was a paradise, but not a home. This was where Odysseus washed ashore. Ship broken, men lost, heart heavy with too many goodbyes. And this was where Calypso found him. She was not what the stories would later claim, not wicked, not scheming, not cruel. She was a daughter of Titans, old as stone and starlight, left alone in her eternity. She had waited lifetimes for something to change. And one day a man came from the sea. Odysseus did not rise as a hero. He did not speak for many days. Calypso wrapped him in linen, laid him beneath blooming vines, and fed him figs soaked in honey. She did not ask his name. She knew it already. And so she offered him what no one else ever had, peace. She showed him quiet waters, warm caves, the sweet press of immortality. "Stay," she said one night, as the stars blinked softly above them. "You will not grow old here. You will not suffer. You will be mine, and I will be yours, and the world will forget you, but you will never know pain again." Odysseus listened. He lay beside her. He held her hand. But every morning he walked alone to the shore. There he would sit, watching the waves as they breathed in and out. The sea always faced west, and west always was Ithaca. He thought of Penelope's voice, not loud but steady, of the curve of the olive trees, of his son Telemachus, who, when last seen, was barely a boy. And he wept, for the years gone, for the face he couldn't quite remember, for the promise he had carried through storms and fire. "I am tired," he told Calypso. "I know," she whispered. "Then rest here. I can't." And so the gods intervened. Hermes arrived, Wing-footed, laughing lightly as always, he carried no threat, only a decree from Olympus, let the man go. Calypso said nothing at first. Then, slowly, she nodded. Her eyes held no anger, only the slow ache of farewell. She led Odysseus to the shore, gave him timber and tools, watched him build a raft with quiet hands and the strength of someone who still believed in his journey. At dawn, she kissed his brow. "I will not forget you," she said. And then he was gone, carried by the tide, the wind curling softly behind him. For days the sea was kind. The waves rose gently, and the stars guided him forward. But even peace does not last forever. Dark clouds gathered once more, and Poseidon, ever slow to forgive, raised a storm. The sky split, the sea howled. His raft shattered, and still Odysseus clung to a beam of wood, his arms wrapped around it like a memory. Rain blinded him, salt burned his lips. For 2 days and nights he drifted, barely alive. Then light, a shoreline, Phaeacia. He awoke on soft sand beneath rustling trees. A girl's voice called out. The princess Nausicaa, gentle-eyed and laughing shyly behind her veil. She gave him clothes, led him to her father's court, and Odysseus, at last, was received not as a warrior, but as a weary traveller. The palace of the Phaeacians shimmered with gold and quiet joy. Their halls rang with music, and their tables overflowed with food and welcome. They asked no price for kindness. When the king, Alcinous, asked for his story, Odysseus stood before the gathered court and told it all. He did not boast. He spoke gently of Troy, of lotus flowers and giants, of Circe's island and the whispering dead. He told of the Sirens, whose song he had not yet faced, but soon would. The hall was still when he finished, and Alcinous, rising with warmth in his voice, said only, "Then let us send you home." The ship they gave him was strong and silent. Its hull curved like a seashell. Its sails caught wind that seemed woven from dreams. He lay on the deck, wrapped in soft cloth, the stars wheeling overhead. And in the hush of that voyage, he remembered Circe's warning. "The Sirens are near," she had said. "Their song is not one of death. It is worse. It is love remembered. It is every sweet ache you ever longed for. You will want to listen. You will want to stop. But you must not." And so Odysseus prepared. He took wax and melted it into the ears of his sailors, and for himself he asked for ropes. "Bind me," he said, "even if I beg, even if I scream. Do not let me go." They nodded. The ship sailed on, and soon the sea grew flat, the air thick, the colour of the sky dimmed to pearl, and from the mist the song began. It was not loud, not sharp. It was soft, sweet, too sweet. It sounded like Penelope's laughter, like his son's voice, still young, like Ithaca on a summer morning, like everything he had ever loved and nearly lost. Tears ran down his face. He strained against the ropes. He shouted, not in rage but in longing, "Let me go, let me hear it fully." But the men rowed on, deaf to his cries. The Sirens stood upon a narrow shore, not monstrous but beautiful. Their eyes held centuries. Their song curved like the sea, promising not pain but rest. And still the ship passed, still the ropes held, until, at last, the song faded. not in anger, but in sorrow, and the mist broke, and Odysseus collapsed, not in defeat, but in relief. The sky returned, the sea rose, and Ithaca waited just ahead. Chapter 5, Home at last, heart at peace. Ithaca, after all the storms, all the silence, and all the years, it was still there, not brighter than memory, not lessened by time. Simply there. Odysseus opened his eyes to soft morning light and the feel of his island beneath his hands. His ship had landed silently in the night, slipping into the bay like a long-lost thought. The sailors who had brought him, the kind, dreamlike people of Phaeacia, had left without waking him, a gift of peace. He stood barefoot on the shore, breathing in the scent of wild thyme and sea salt. The same hills, the same sky, and yet everything felt new, touched by the long ache of longing. He knelt and kissed the earth, not as a king, as a son, a husband, a man who had been gone too long. No one knew he had returned. There were no trumpets, no fires lit on mountain tops, just birdsong in the trees and the wind in the grass, moving through the olive groves like an old friend. He did not walk home as Odysseus, king of Ithaca. He walked as a stranger, dressed in ragged clothes, leaning on a staff, with stories buried in his chest like seeds in winter. What he saw grieved him. His palace had not fallen, but it had changed. Inside, men feasted loudly on his food, laughed in his halls, drank his wine as though it were theirs. They were suitors, more than 100, waiting, pressing, demanding that Penelope choose a new husband. She had waited 20 years, and still she waited. Each day she wove a burial shroud for Odysseus, claiming she could not choose until it was done. And each night, when the house slept, she undid the weaving, thread by thread, inch by inch, a quiet defiance that no one saw but the gods. Odysseus watched from the shadows. He wept, not from rage, from love, and for a time he stayed hidden. He reunited first with his old swineherd, Eumaeus, loyal still, his heart unchanged. Together they plotted quietly. When Telemachus returned, the son now grown, tall and brave, Odysseus revealed himself to the boy, not with grandeur, with tears. "Father," Telemachus whispered, touching his face as though he were a ghost. "It's really you. I am home," Odysseus said, "but not yet known." They planned. And at last the day came. Penelope, wearied by pressure, by sorrow, by time itself, declared a challenge. She would marry the man who could string her husband's bow, a thing of old wood and warrior strength, and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads. None could do it. The suitors laughed, struggled, failed. Their hands were soft, their hearts were greedy. Then the beggar stepped forward. Odysseus. Mocking words flew, sneers, but Penelope, though silent, leaned forward, eyes narrowed. He took the bow, and in his hands it sang. He pulled the string, slow, reverent, and loosed the arrow. It flew true, through all 12 axe heads, without hesitation. Silence fell. Odysseus stood tall. His face shone with the firelight of home. He revealed himself at last, voice calm and certain. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, king of Ithaca, and I have returned." The suitors scrambled, but it was too late. They had taken too much. disrespected the hearth, dismissed the memory of a man who had crossed the world for love. Odysseus restored his home with Telemachus at his side, not in cruelty, but in justice. A house that had been darkened now breathed again, and still Penelope did not run to him, not yet. She looked at him long and quiet. Her heart raced, but her mind waited. She asked him of their bed, the one carved from a living olive tree, rooted deep in the stone of their chamber, a thing no one could move, no one could fake. And when Odysseus described it, not as legend but as memory, she finally breathed. Her eyes filled, her arms opened, and the years vanished. In the quiet that followed, husband and wife sat beneath the stars. No words passed for a long while, just silence, just presence, just the warmth of hands joined once more. Later, Odysseus wandered the olive groves, alone. He touched bark he had climbed as a child, sat beneath trees his father had planted. The moonlight fell like silver dust on the leaves, and the night air smelled of returning. He had seen cities fall, gods rage, monsters rise from the sea. He had listened to the dead, refused the immortality of paradise, fought through flame and song and silence. And now he was home, not for glory, not for peace, just to be. The winds no longer called his name, the oars no longer waited. There was nothing left to seek, and still something lingered, soft and eternal. Not a hero's tale, but a lullaby. Odysseus, the man who came home. Sleep well now, traveller, the waves have calmed. The fire is warm, and home is never truly lost.